we just got here, and then we shut down. And it's been a struggle with us. But when I'm talking about this today, then I want you to understand that I'm coming from two different perspectives. I'm coming from a person who is a part of the family, where I'm getting to know everyone, love you guys very much. You're already becoming very close to me, and I appreciate that a lot, tremendously. And then I'm also coming from a perspective from outside, because I'm still somewhat on the outside looking in some ways. And as a preacher, sometimes that's just the way it works, but hopefully not for long. So take this from a person who cares, and a person who wants what is best for us, okay? And when we look at our lives and what we try to do with our lives, who we try to become, it's important for us to make sure we have the right priorities and that we have the right motivations. So today's primarily going to be about motivation, why we do the things that we do. And it's important for us because there's so much a part of our lives that, I mean, this is it. This is everything we do has a motive for it. And motives are very tricky things. One of the things I notice about motives is that we always assign the best motives to ourselves and the worst motives to other people, right? Or that's a tendency that we have. But if we talk about our own motives, it's always the best of intentions. We always have, and motives are very good at masquerading themselves as righteous and holy and godly, but they're not always that way. And so we have to consistently readjust and assess and look at ourselves and study. You know, in the New Testament, there were a lot of opportunities to do that. We talked about that in class a little bit with the apostles, and how the tendency to being that close to Jesus, what it would have done to you, how you would have reacted to that perhaps, and the ease in which pride may come in, the ease in which their motivations would have been wrong, and their motivations were wrong a lot of the times because they had a misunderstanding of what Jesus was trying to do. But then after Jesus came and he died and he raised again, and he started the message of the gospel, the kingdom of Christ has been established on earth, and the message is being spread far and wide. There were still problems because of that. And one of the problems you can imagine is because we as human beings, we want to do things, and we want to make a name for ourselves, we want to do all kinds of things, right? And because of that, we can get in the way sometimes of our own selves, our own growth. The first century church certainly saw that. They saw that problem. And the church of Corinth seemed to be one of those that had an extra dose of problems that they were facing. It's a younger congregation and a lot of problems, probably because there was such a multitude of different nationalities in their area, a lot of different cultures, a lot of different ideas that were floating around. It was very much a melting pot, kind of like we can say we have in America here. I don't know if it's to that extent, but it certainly was. It was a port city. There's a lot of people that travel in and out. So there were a lot of different ideas, a lot of paganism. And so Christians coming out of those things automatically had problems. One of the things that they found is that Paul found is that there was a lot of people who were doing things because of their particular situation that they were in. Let me explain a little bit more. They found themselves in a position of power. And the reason they had power was because of their abilities that they were given by the Holy Spirit. Now, if anyone had right to claim a power for being able to do things, it would have been Paul, who refused that. In fact, he says, you know, the only authority he has authority as an apostle, but it was for the benefit of the church, not for his own glory. But when other people got those kinds of powers, it would be easy for them, if you could think about it, how we might react. Personal, like human nature might be to start thinking that I have power, therefore I have power. I have the Holy Spirit given to me. I can heal people. I can speak in tongues. I can speak in languages I've never even learned. I can hear a language I've never learned before, I've never heard before, and I can tell you what they're saying. I can tell you if something someone says is actually truth or not without even having a study. Those are very powerful things. And there were things that the church there seemed to be in their striving for growth. They seemed to think that those were really what were important. We know that because at the end of 1 Corinthians chapter 12, he says, I'm going to show you a better way. This is something much, much better than these grand miracles that you can do. Not discounting the miracles, but he still showed them a better way. So we're going to be in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. But I want you to recognize, I want you to realize that there's an association here that's made, that Paul makes in the first few verses that we'll talk about in just a little bit. An association that's very common for humans to make, and that is an association between power and value. The more power I have, the more valuable I am. And that's not the only way that people find value, but it is a major way that people find value. And what I mean by power is not necessarily dictatorship. It's not necessarily, lording over someone. I talk about power as the ability to get things done. All right. So I have the ability to get things done. I have the ability to do certain things. Therefore, my value as a person has increased because I have power. Now that is a very dangerous place to be, but humans find ourselves in that place all the time. So we have power, we have the ability to do something, and certainly because of that, all of us have had those people at work who were over us, who let the power go to the head a little bit. And it's amazing what just a little bit of power can do to someone, right? They have the ability, and all of a sudden now, because they have the ability to tell you what to do, they feel like they have more value than you because they're more important than you are. And those things do not correlate. They're not the same thing. Power and value are not the same. Because here's what I've learned. When you look at value, we are valuable as humans because God created us in his image. That's why we have value. And on top of that, we also have the fact that we have been recreated, we have been born again in the spirit, in the water and the spirits, that new birth. And we've been made in the image of Jesus. So our value relates to us being created in the image of God. It's not because I have done anything. Now, the book of Ecclesiastes, the entire book is about this idea. And it doesn't just talk about power, but it does talk about it in there. He talked about all kinds of things that he did, and he valued, his life had value, and he thought would have value and meaning because of the great things that he did. And I've gotten caught up in that myself at times, where I look around and I say, I've got to have these huge projects. I need to get these things, I need to get a lot of things done. And come to find out, it was because I wanted to have more value. I wanted to be more valuable in my own mind, in my own eyes. That's a very dangerous place to be. And power then sometimes gets us into the point where we make decisions that are not for the benefit of others, but because I want to have more value for myself. And power is never intended to be that way. We have value because God created us. We may have power in certain areas and ability to do things in certain areas, but that doesn't increase our value. In fact, if you look through the scriptures and you look through what he says in the book of Ecclesiastes, he says, let's see, at the end of chapter 12, verse 13, 14, here's the end of the matter. Here's when everything's said and done. When you consider all of life and all the motivations, all the things we can do, here is the only thing that matters, is that whether you love God and keep his commandments. That's the only thing that matters, because there's coming a judgment day. And our value can be diminished by the things that we do, but it can never be improved. You can never be more valuable than you are right now. And that may depress some people. But probably because you have too low of a self-image. You don't understand your own value. But you can't increase your value by doing things. It doesn't make you any more valuable. So you can have all the big businesses and have millions and millions of dollars and billions of dollars, and it's all said and done. You may have a lot of power, but Bill Gates and all of his glory and all the money that he has, and lots of other people that have lots and lots of money, he is not any more valuable as a human being than you and I are. no more value. He has a lot more power, no more value. He's made in the image of God just like you are. As we have said, I've heard so many times growing up, he puts his pants on one leg at a time, right? We are all the same. And we, as humans, we try to make ourselves better than everyone else. And we do that in different ways. Now, I said we can devalue ourselves, and we can. We can devalue ourselves to the point where other people may, in a sense, be more valuable, but really it's just we're devaluing ourselves, and it's just a pity that we get that way. So sometimes we have huge projects. Sometimes we have things that we want to accomplish. Sometimes it's all a matter of then trying to find value and importance. And I get it. That's who we are. That's how we look around the world. And so I don't say that in a bad way. But we Christians here in Caddo, we have a very, very good opportunity. Now, I've preached a sermon before about the opportunity that we have in the surrounding area, being in the right place in the right time. I believe that sincerely. But we're actually going through something right now that is interesting because it's a very valuable time. We're in a time of stress. We're in a time of a lot of ideas that are floating around. And we have a very valuable opportunity. And that opportunity is this. We have an opportunity to see ourselves maybe in ways we haven't been able to before. The reason for that is because in the congregation here, for whatever reason, and I think it's a good reason, whatever reason, we're facing a power vacuum in the church. And it's obvious to anyone who looks. And when that happens, we stand in a very, very good place. It's good for the church because leadership will develop. It's good for us, though, because as individuals, because you will see a better glimpse of yourself in position, in times of power vacuums. You will see a better picture of yourself then than maybe any other time in your life. Because when power, what happens in a power vacuum? What happens in any vacuum? Something tries to fill it, right? If you're aware, if you're astute enough to look at yourself, and don't look at other people and assume their motives, but look at your own motives and find out if I'm trying to fill this void, which is a good thing to fill. If I'm trying to fill this void, what's my motivation? Why am I doing it? Is it because I want to be more important? Are my motives right? I hope I communicate this. I want you to understand that I'm not looking down on people who are trying to get things done. Not at all. I'm asking us to take a step back, to take a breath, and make sure our motives are the correct ones. Because in the end, what we want to see is we have a power vacuum. What we want to see is people filling that vacuum with the right motivations. And if we will do that, we will see growth. This is I didn't see it coming. And I don't understand all the dynamics of it. I don't know where it's coming from, but there is obviously something going on. And I'm glad to be a part of it. You know, all growth is struggle, right? And all growth has a potential for being very bad and a potential for being very good. That's why I wanted to take a reset today and just remind us, this is where we are. I think it's a wonderful thing. All of us want to be important. All of us want to matter. All of us want to be heard. But we need to hear this. This is not our church. It never has been. And it never will be. This church is not any of ours because none of us can hold our hand up and see a nail hole. This belongs to the one who has the nail holes. And because of that, while we're trying to achieve, and we're trying to do, we need to remember that this is not our church. It's the Lord Jesus Christ's church. And because of that, we need to make sure we're doing things correctly, in the right way, right motive. And I'm not up here assigning motives. I'm not up here condemning motives. I'm up here encouraging us to make sure we look at our own motives, because they are tricky. So look at 1 Corinthians chapter 13. This is where you can see really a good basis for this idea. And I mentioned this before, but it's important today. Look at the value statements he makes here. In chapter 13, verse 1, he says, though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I have become sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profits me nothing. And at the end, he says, of verse 1, he says, I'm a sounding brass or a clanging cymbal, meaning pretty much worthless, right? Not really a whole lot comes from that. Then at the end of verse 2, he goes on a little bit further. He says, I'm nothing. And in verse 3, he says, it profits me nothing. So here we can look at it in all aspects. He's talking about value as a Christian. What is it really important? And it would be easy for us to think that because I could speak in tongues, look at the list of things that wouldn't you like to be able to do any of these things? I could speak with tongues of men and even of angels, right? That would be a wonderful thing to be able to do. But it's absolutely worthless if I don't have the right motive. And then it's worthless to me, because in the next verse, if I could have the gift of prophecy, understand all mysteries, man, I would love that. Have all knowledge, have all faith. I could even move mountains with my faith. Man, I could get things done, right? But if my motivation is not love, I'm nothing. You see, value statements. And the same thing with 3. I can give everything I have away. I can give my body to be burned. But if it's not done in love, I have no value from it. It doesn't profit me at all. It doesn't increase me. And that's an important thing to recognize. Paul doesn't go into this saying, hey, do you want to be more valuable? He comes into this saying, do you want to avoid being less valuable? How do you avoid being less valuable? Make sure you're doing everything in love. That's how you can have the value that God has for you, because being made in the image of God means that we, as part of our nature, must have love in there. Love is who God is. So the value that they had, they thought that because they could do these great things, they had great value. But he says, listen, being able to do great things doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything at all. And we can change everything about this place. And we can paint the walls purple. We could meet at 3 a.m. on Sunday morning. We could have it 85 degrees in here. We could take all the pews out. We could blacken all the windows. We could have strobe lights in here. We could have all kinds of things we could do. We could change everything up, all that we want to. It's not going to make any of us any better as humans. And it also doesn't matter, because if it's 3 a.m. with no pews, I'm going to be here. And you will too. It's 100 degrees in here. We're going to figure out a way to meet. Why? Because we're Christians. So when we look at the things that we want to do and have done, we need to remember that it's not because I want them done or you want them done. It's because it's the benefit of the entire congregation. I know we understand that, but it's good for us to remember that. And Paul brings that out really well in this. If anyone had the right to think himself or herself as superior, it would have been these people, right? They had all kinds of things that we can't even touch. And yet sometimes we get ourselves caught up in that too. We get the big fish in the little pond syndrome, right? Sometimes that's human nature. And my intention is, like I said, I'm not assigning motives. I'm not saying anyone's doing that, but we have to be careful. And so we look at this, and how can I know then whether or not I am doing things, pursuing things for this church in a way that's loving, or with the emphasis and motivation of love? Well, there's tests, and And this chapter gives a little bit of information about what love does and how love behaves. So we look at our behavior and we have to ask ourselves, is this really what I'm trying to do? So he says in verse 4, love suffers long and is kind. And if my kindness is not expressed in my pursuits, then I can probably tell that my motivation may not be love. Now, it could be, I may just have gotten frustrated by something, but if I don't see kindness in my words and my actions, I don't see patience with one another, then my motivation may be something different than love. He says it does not envy, it does not parade itself, is not puffed up. And well, envy is something that all of us get and none of us have, right? It's so easy to look around at someone and be envious of someone else. Do you know why? I don't know the psychology of it, but it seems to me pretty easy that I look around and I see people that I've been envious of in my past, and I think about that. I think of who have I been envious of and how. And it's usually because of people who are doing what I feel like I should be doing, or I could be doing, or I might have the power to do, I might have the authority if certain circumstances were in better for me. And I look at other people and they don't deserve that. That's envy. You're upset because someone else has the ability to do something. Upset because someone else has the opportunity to have a little bit of power. That's envy. And that's certainly not a motivation of love. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up. Parade. I love the idea of parading because I can just see someone, it would be me. I'm in this band uniform. I've never been in band, but what's the guy in the front? He's marching and he's got the stick going up like this. I can just see myself going up and down the road that way sometimes because we want everyone to look at me, right? And so if I go a long time, if I'm doing something, man, this steps on my toes. I'm not stepping on yours, I'm stepping on mine. You go and you're doing something day in and day out, and you look up and you realize nobody's looking, nobody pays attention, nobody cares, nobody even said thank you, nobody has any idea how much I'm doing. I've stopped doing it because I love, and I've started doing it because I want someone to notice me. That's parading yourself. I've seen it in so many different ways. Growing up in the church, some of them have been very comical. It's very funny how people will misbehave because they don't get enough attention. I say it's comical, I've done the same thing. That's parading yourself. Look at me. The look at me syndrome is not love, because love continues to do what is best for some other people, regardless of whether or not we're getting credit for it. If we're seeking credit, we're not seeking love. That's a difference. And then he says, does not behave rudely. Oh, puffed up. I didn't want to miss that one. This is a problem that I've had in my life at times. I mentioned it in class, but all of us have been there. We think that, we have a little knowledge, and knowledge puffs up. We think we know some things. And because of that, I get better. I'm better than you are. And that's the idea here. Obviously, that's not love, because we're not pursuing what is in the best interest of someone else. Does not behave rudely in verse 5, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil. All those things. If you're struggling with those, it might be that your motivations need to be adjusted. Does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in truth. I didn't understand that for a long time, verse 6. But I have to admit, there have been times when I've seen it in my life, and there have been times I've seen it in other people. When they come to me with some of the most terrible things that other people have done, and it's almost like they're giddy about it. Well, shame on us if we're that way. Why is it that we want to see other people fail and do wrong? It's because we have a motivation that's not love. That's for sure. And then he says, rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Another passage to consider with this is James chapter 4. And James chapter 4 gives us some good insight into the book of James. It's just so full of insight into ourselves. Chapter 4, really, there's some great questions here. He says, where do wars and fights come from among you. So this is where wars and fights. Now, wars and fights can be little skirmishes, or they can be huge, grand things, right? And we have little skirmishes and little things because people start yipping, yapping, and we have all these little, what we call brush fires, what I call brush fires. And sometimes what I do, my job as a preacher, is to help put out those fires. The fires are from different people who don't get along for various reasons. Where does that come from? He says, do they not come from your desires for pleasure that war in your members? You know, it takes two to tango, right? So if we're bickering with each other, we can blame the other person all we want to. But the reason we're bickering with that other person is probably because we have things that we want. They come from our desires for pleasure, our desires for ease. We want certain things to be done our way, don't we? We're humans. Of course we do. But he says in verse 2, you lust and do not have, you murder and covet and cannot obtain. That's how bad it gets. And yet, he says, you fight in war, yet you do not have because you do not ask. So it might be that our relationship with God is such to the point we don't have the things that we think we need to get from someone else, or they're doing something that we don't like that's harming us. It might just be that our relationship with God that needs to improve and not actually maybe theirs. And it could be both, probably is both. But this is where we are. But this is what I want to look at, Romans chapter 15 and verse 14, kind of draw it to an end. And I hope you understand what I'm saying here, that we're talking about value. What does it mean to be valuable, and how do we increase that value? And really, it's been kind of a negative in the sense of this is how we don't increase our value. We don't do it by fighting for our own, fighting for our rights, having our own and doing the things that we think we should be doing. I'm not talking about standing up for truth. I'm just talking about how we are in general. Romans chapter 15 and verse 14. And here's this confidence, and I share this confidence here as well. He says, I myself am confident concerning you, my brethren, that you also are full of goodness, filled with all knowledge, able also to admonish one another. So this is where I believe we are, that we have a lot here. We have a lot of good things here. And he says he's confident that they are full of goodness. And I believe that too. And I believe that what we have going on here, and it's not a major thing, but it is happening, is that we have a lot of people who are stepping up and trying to exert some influence. And that's a good thing. It should be applauded. And so what I'm saying here also that is, let us make sure that what we're doing is actually goodness. It's actually for the benefit of other people and not for the benefit of me looking better or feeling better. And I think that we can get there. And then he says, filled with all knowledge, able to admonish one another. I believe that we have a lot of knowledge in this congregation too. We have a lot of wisdom here. There's a lot of people who are growing and stretching. I see it. It's wonderful to see. And if not for the COVID thing, no telling how much more we would have grown in numbers over the last few months. We still have the potential for it in the next few months or next few years. We have a lot of good things happening, and we're able to admonish one another. And so that admonishing is what we all are actually doing. You know, we have the ability, we have a lot of men who are able to stand up and teach. We're able to teach classes, preach sermons, and even one-on-one, we all have the ability and the wisdom to come to each other and talk to each other and work things out, which is the way we should be. So this is an opportunity for us. We kind of stand at a crossroads in some ways, not in a huge way, but we do. And the paths that we decide to go on and whatever things we're doing, in some ways are very insignificant. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter to you ultimately. What time we meet, for example. Who cares? But it is important that we discuss it. All kinds of things like that really don't matter, but they're important that we discuss them. And my contention, my hope is that when we make all these decisions and these paths, these forks, that our number one priority is that we do it in love, that we love each other, that we love God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and we grow as a family together because that's who we are. And I tell you what, when we walk through things like this, we walk through situations and opportunities for growth, and we take advantage of those things, we're going to look back and say, this is so much better than we were. So that's a good thing. And maybe this morning you've been touched by this. I know when I was thinking about this, that's part of the 2 days I was off on myself. This is part of what I was really meditating and praying about, thinking about for my own self. And I saw some things. I learned some things about myself. And it's good for us to do that. So maybe you found some things that don't sit right with you about yourself, and you need to make some changes. I hope that you will. If you need some help with that, we're here for you. We want to help you. You know, it's just a matter of talking through some things, and we can do it for sure. If you're not a Christian and you need to be baptized for the remission of your sins, we have the water available for you. And Jesus said, unless you're born of the water of the Spirit, you can't enter the kingdom of heaven. We want you to go to heaven with us. And all of us can be there, but only those people who will submit to the will of God will actually be there. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 7, verse 21, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. So if we will obey God, then we will be there. And maybe if you're a Christian and you haven't been living right, it's a good opportunity to make some changes. We can help you in any way, please, once you come as we stand and sing.